Hello, and welcome to Out West, the official podcast of the Western Governors Association, a bipartisan organization representing the governors of the 22 westernmost states and territories. I'm Jim Ogsbury, Executive Director of WGA. Today's episode is the fourth and final in a series about Oregon Governor Kate Brown's initiative to create an electric vehicles roadmap. During her year as chair of WGA, Governor Brown focused a good deal of the association's energy on her visionary project to promote the enhanced planning, siting, and coordination of electric vehicle infrastructure in the West. In this episode, we hear from Governor Brown herself as she discusses the genesis of her initiative, the economic and environmental impacts of an electric vehicle or EV network, and the future of EVs in the West.
Hello, everyone. This is Kevin Moss. I'm a policy advisor here at the Western Governors Association, and you're listening to the fourth and final Electric Vehicles Roadmap episode of Out West. For today's episode, I'll be interviewing Oregon Governor Brown, who just wrapped up her Electric Vehicles Roadmap initiative and her year as WGA chair. Governor Brown, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Governor Brown, let's go back to the start of your term as chair in 2020 at the launch of your Electric Vehicles Roadmap initiative. Tell me a little bit about why did you focus on EV infrastructure for your WGA chair initiative, and why did you think that would be important for the region?
Well, first of all, I have to say I'm really proud of the work that our Western governors, our staff, and the team at WGA put into my initiative. The goal of the initiative was to develop common standards and practices for EV infrastructure in our states. I think one of the things that was really clear as we developed the central policy initiative of my year as chair of the Western Governors Association is that we should literally put the people of the West above all else, because we know that's how governors approach their work with WGA. We work really hard to set aside political differences to help the entire region succeed. And obviously, there's no more important place than our economies. I do believe that EV design, manufacturing, sales, and infrastructure deployment represent an incredible economic opportunity across the entire Western region.
I definitely agree with that. And I think one thing that really stood out to me working on the initiative is how much bipartisan opportunity there is in the electric vehicle sector. But one other piece that I found really interesting is just the diversity of electric vehicle adoption strategies and infrastructure deployment activities that are happening across the West. But would love to hear about any particular examples in Oregon that you think our listeners would find interesting or that you want to share with our audience today.
Well, what I am really excited about is that Western states are currently leveraging very creative public-private partnerships to encourage EV usage in our rural communities. We are seeing much greater use of medium and heavy-duty EV trucks that will lead to economic opportunities throughout the entire region. I'd love to share with you what's happening in Oregon. Electric Island is in Portland. It is the first charging station specifically designed for medium and heavy-duty trucks on the West Coast. It's a partnership between Daimler Trucks North America and Portland General Electric, and they worked together to open the site earlier this year. And it is aligned with the work we are doing on the West Coast Clean Transit Corridor Initiative, which is a collaboration between 9 electric utilities and 2 government agencies that will eventually electrify 1,300 miles of I-5 across the 3 West Coast states to provide publicly available charging for freight and delivery. And this is so important for the economy, and I am so excited to see it happen.
Yeah, I think, Governor Brown, one thing that I liked most about your initiative was getting to work on some of those medium and heavy-duty charging questions. I think there's a lot of energy there right now, and it's still a very nascent industry, but a lot of good work to be done in terms of coordinating between utilities and charging station providers and vehicle manufacturers. And it's one of those examples where everyone needs to be rowing in the same direction, because you got to get a lot of electrons to one spot to charge some of those vehicles. So a lot of good infrastructure challenges to address for policymakers there. But I do want to build on that point that I just made in just terms of the fact that a lot of our initiative discussions focused on the need for coordination across those various vehicle and charging station and utility sectors that I just mentioned. But one thing that we really tried to do through the initiative is bring in the private sector to get their input on charging station policies and best practices and things of that nature. So why do you think that it's important that state policies be developed with input from the private sector?
Electric Island is a great example of a public-private partnership and something that each side could not have accomplished working alone. And I just truly believe that by working together, we can accomplish so much more. And I think from the perspective of state government, it's critically important that we understand the EV market and that we not impede it. And I think what that means is that at the beginning, we have to have the private sector at the table as we are exploring ways to support the market itself. We want to make sure that the private sector's input is there. And I have to say, it was absolutely invaluable to my initiative and to the EV MOU that several states have signed on to. So the private sector is absolutely critical to this work, and we couldn't do it without them, frankly.
Most definitely. And I want to double down on that appreciation to all of the charging station network operators and vehicle manufacturers that took part in the initiative. And I think you speak to some of the challenges for states and governors is just that this is a new industry and it's evolving really rapidly, and it can sometimes be hard for government to keep pace with all that innovation and technological change. Do you want to change gears a little bit to more of the policy side of the initiative? So through our various discussions, we unearthed a handful of regional federal issues that affect the West in particular. So just wanted to give you the opportunity to highlight some of those bipartisan federal policy recommendations that were identified and included in both the initiative report and also WGA's updated surface transportation policy resolution.
Well, again, here's another place where the private sector played a role, and with their support, we identified a number of federal recommendations that are really necessary to support increased adoption of EVs throughout the West. I think as a region, the West faces really unique challenges in terms of distance and terrain. I think about the lush green Willamette Valley, right, versus the high desert of Utah. And both in terms of scope, the size of the Western region, and frankly, some of the remoteness of our communities is going to make this effort really challenging. But what I have to say is it's absolutely critical that we lay the infrastructure to ensure that the siting of EV chargers at rest areas and address some of the federal government's requirements of distances between charging stations to qualify as an EV corridor. If we don't tackle some of these underlying issues, it's going to be really, really challenging. I think the other thing that's really, really important is that the West is also very central to critical supply chains to support this particular industry. And of course, our Western states should be in the conversation about how we build these supply chains in a secure way that works for the entire country. So the West is instrumental from my perspective. We tend to be a region of early adopters, and we have unique geographic and space challenges that folks on the East Coast, frankly, just don't face.
Most certainly. And yeah, I think some of those recommendations are particularly well timed, given that Congress is thinking about infrastructure funds and how to deploy those most effectively in the months and years to come. And I think making that case that the rural West has particular terrain, grid infrastructure, distance challenges will just ensure that some of these electric vehicle dollars are aimed to the right places and help build out a functional network in a place where it's kind of hard to do that. Governor Brown, I do want to give you a platform to talk about the MOU that you signed with a number of other Western governors. And so we currently have 9 Western governors that have signed that agreement, and would just love to hear from you. You know, what are some of your hopes for that MOU and the effects that it could have on the West in general, but also the EV industry moving forward?
Well, as you mentioned, we now have 9 states who agreed to working together to ensure consistent EV standards across the Western region. But I really think of the MOU as a living document. And I do believe that in the future, as more Americans adopt EV usage, other states will join us. And I absolutely believe that the work over the last year that we have done together is embodied by the MOU, and that this MOU is a legacy for the future.
Absolutely. And yeah, WGA is certainly willing to, work with any states that haven't signed on yet, but, the number of EVs are ticking up in their states. And if they want to get involved, we're certainly willing to help them do that. So Governor Brown, just one final question for you. And just if you have any final parting thoughts on electric vehicles, your initiative, or the development of the EV sector that you want to share with our listeners today.
Sure. I think there's absolutely no question that where we are in sync in the Western region is around the economic opportunities around EVs and EV infrastructure. We've got great support. And I think my colleagues fully understand the incredible economic opportunities that EVs bring to our communities and, frankly, to the entire region. But I think the other issue that's out there, frankly, is the environmental imperative. And I'll just speak for what's happening in Oregon. In addition to the pandemic, we've had a handful of other incredible, historic, unprecedented climate events in the last year, from historic wildfires to unprecedented ice storms to most recently the heat dome, where we lost over 100 lives, unfortunately. And this is clearly a harbinger of climate change. And the West is seeing the impacts of changing climate every single day. And I do believe by tackling early adoption of EVs and EV infrastructure, that the West can do its fair share in tackling climate change. And there's great economic benefits to doing so. So it's an incredible win-win for the entire Western region, and the right thing to do.
Outstanding. Well, Governor Brown, I would just like to reiterate WGA's appreciation for your work as chair. I think that hosting an initiative on electric vehicles infrastructure was really timely and also an exciting issue for us to examine, and got us into some new policy areas. That's always great for our overall footprint. And we're certainly looking forward to operationalizing the findings and recommendations, and just can't thank you enough for your work as chair and also carving out some time today to speak with us.
Well, thank you so much. And honestly, I have to tell you, our highway system would not have been built without federal assistance. I think it's fair to say that an EV infrastructure system throughout the Western region will need federal assistance, and really pleased to see the administration stepping up to help the Western region with significant investments in EV infrastructure. So thanks to the WGA staff and team. Really appreciate all of your hard work on this initiative. Let's get it done.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Out West. WGA would like to congratulate Governor Brown on both her initiative and successful year as chair of WGA. Would also like to thank her for her tremendous bipartisan leadership. To learn more about Governor Brown's initiative, please visit westgov.org/initiatives, where you'll find the Electric Vehicles Roadmap Initiative Special Report. Happy trails, everyone.